Thank you for coming to the Awaken Life podcast. I'm your host, Scott Landis. How can you live an absolutely fulfilling and purpose-filled life, maintain a passionate, intimate relationship, all while raising kids and growing multiple streams of income? That's the big question we seek to answer on this podcast by interviewing people who are already doing it. One thing we know for sure is it takes a community to do it well. So thank you for being a part of the Awaken Life community. I'm looking forward to growing with you, and on to the episode. Welcome to the Awaken Life podcast with Scott Landis, and today my guest is Michael Stansberry. He is a real estate investor. He owns a couple of businesses, owns some properties. He's a married guy, married to Deidre. He has 4 kids. Some of them are adults. Some of them are still in school. So he's got all sorts of experience that we can glean from. Also, fun fact, voice announcer. And so always up for giving us a nice vocal. So let's start with that. Michael, could you welcome everyone to Awaken Life podcast?
Well, welcome everybody to the Awaken Life broadcast with Scott Landis. Scott Landis is an amazing person. I mean, and he helps people, helps married couples, help them make sure that they're taking care of each other, and your business is rolling well. But most importantly, he draws out what your purpose is in life and tries to make sure that you are maintaining that purpose and not straying away from it. Sometimes it goes well, Scott. Sometimes I go off the rails. I try to do that off the cuff. I did that with no script, no teleprompter, no nothing.
Not to brag, but yeah.
You know, sometimes it goes well. But yeah, man, happy to be here.
Give me just one of these, like just a bit outside baseball.
That's from Major League. Bob Uecker, probably one of the best broadcasters, and hilarious. Major League was a great movie, but yeah, he would say just a bit outside.
There it is. All right. Well, sorry to put you through that and put you on the spot, but thank you for taking your time to be with me. We met with our mutual friend Brett, and Brett was on the show a while back, and then we had Ron Walraven, hard to say, easy to know, and now I've got a couple of people maybe lined up that in that circle, but thanks for being here. So you're married. How long have you been married?
21 years. We got married in 2002.
So you guys were like 7 or 8 when you met.
7 or 8. Yeah, exactly. It was a marriage between our family. I don't know. But no, we were, so I met my wife. I moved back to Memphis after I went to school at the University of Arkansas, and I met her at a restaurant that we both were working at. She was dating somebody else at the time, and he was kind of a short guy. And so I'd make fun of the fact that she was way taller than him, and that just didn't look right. Mm-hmm. So that played to your strengths. Yeah, I played to my strengths, was just being 5'10" is not necessarily a strength, but being average against subpar helps out. I didn't endear myself too much to her at the beginning, but over time it worked. So
you wore her down.
So, but yeah, and then we have 4 kids, 20, all the way down to 9. So 2 boys and 2 girls. Super fun.
Awesome. Okay, so this is a show that we kind of focus on things like purpose and living a life of intention while trying to be the best version of ourselves as a leader, as a spouse, as a parent. And so I want to ask you right off the bat, because you're a guy who, I'll just say, I mean, my impression of you is you have a lot of stuff together. You just have things dialed in. You don't seem to have a lot of, major ups and downs. You seem pretty much dialed in, like right down the rails. That's at least the impression that you give off of. And so I want to just go straight into what you feel like your purpose is as it is today. Like, right. The different things you do. How do you live out purpose for yourself?
Well, it's funny. So, I can give you what my purpose is, and it's as I kind of read and get wisdom from different places, it changes a little bit, or the reasons why my purpose um, gets enlightened over time by different books that I read and different people that I meet, and validations of kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it. But I would say that my purpose is to glorify God in everything I do. But what that means practically and what my everyday is I have a real estate business, but I have a family of four, and I really have uh, I'm very focused on creating opportunities for my family to thrive in the business world, post post Michael Stansbury. So my whole purpose in business is to create opportunities for my kids and family and other people to opt into an area where they can grow in wisdom in their business life and economically, and to really have an impact on their world and their culture and their city around them. uh, and but what's even above that, right, is that's kind of the business. But within the family, we're very much, my wife and I made decisions early on that we would get in a church, really make faith our number one. And how do we do that? Well, we make decisions that sports for our kids was not going to be number one, but church was, and things of faith, and making sure that we were not just going to church on Sundays, and this was our thing, but we were going to be actively volunteering and helping where we needed to be. So we kind of put ourselves out there and says, all right, where do we need to be in church? And so we would automatically go where our kids were. And so as they were growing up, we would volunteer in at elementary all the way up to high school, and we have loved doing that. And that's you know I would say this, I love hanging out with kids and teenagers, and helping them with their problems more than I do people our age, because people our age are a little harder to get to. Not, you can't ever change somebody, but the ideas that you have are harder to implant into somebody that's already had 40 or 50 years of habits. Not impossible, but when kids, the benefit of making, and these are all decision based things. These are, we made a decision. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to continue to do this habit. We're
Intentional.
we're going to be this way intentionally, and then sometimes it's gonna, hey, we're not going to be able to do this thing because this thing is more important.
Mm.
And there are always temptations to go, well, we don't have to do that this week because we want to do this thing. There are camps, and there are camps to be done, and outside activities outside of Memphis, activities that the church wants you to go on. And we're like, yeah, we'll do it. We'll head that up, and we'll sacrifice some vacation time to help these kids. And here's the benefit of it. Um, our kids growing up in a really good, stable household. Most of the kids in our church, I would say, don't.
Mm.
Most of the kids in our church, they some come from two-parent households, but they're you these kids get to know you, and you get to know their story. And it's just, there's a lot of junk going on from middle school up to high school. And you get to speak to some of their problems and issues, and they get to see our family doing things. And I'm not going to say the right way, I'm just saying different than what they see. And then they would say, well, is that that gives us an opportunity to speak into their lives about who Christ is and how he can help in whatever their situation that they're going through. And so it's been, but that decision to do that very early on with our kids has led us down this fun path of being able to mentor their friends and people in that stage of life. And that's honestly, that's that of all the things that I do, I have a great business. As a business owner, I love what I do. It's super fun. But that's probably the better thing that I
Mhm.
get to enjoy, is actually mentoring kids, and showing them, just different ways that you can live life, because they're interested in what I do for a living, but also how do you guys parent? I mean, you get kids that are coming from divorced parents or from parents that single moms and things like that, and you get to answer some of their questions about life, and they really pay attention to it, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah,
the purpose. That's kind of what our purpose is.
Yeah. So they pay attention because they see a model that's different, and probably see some other things. I mean, I always filter things through the basic needs. They see some certainty there, some predictability, reliability, stability that they don't normally. Maybe there's some connection that that maybe is at a level that they're not experiencing as much. Yeah, maybe there's some significance there, some importance, some validation. So they see this model and they're attracted to it, and then that gives you a platform to talk about why behind what you do, which is your faith. So yeah, it's a great model. It makes sense. Now, when did you know? Okay, you said, you mentioned, and this is obviously something that happens for all of us. Purpose. It kind of evolves. You articulate it differently over time, but the way you said it now is, besides glorify God and everything, creating opportunities for family and maybe others to thrive beyond you. There's a legacy minded vision there. And when did you know that? Like, how old were you when you kind of had this idea, like you were thinking beyond your time on the planet? Did that happen pretty young, or is that a more recent thing?
Well, I would say that there's always been this nagging thing in the back of my brain of like, why are you building these businesses? And to get into Christendom and really think about your eschatology. My eschatology, as far as the end times, and this is the part that actually fuels my thinking of just legacy is
Okay.
my eschatology has changed over time, and it's changed to be more of a what they call a post-millennialist. And again, it's one of these things in Christendom, and that we don't necessarily. It's not something that is there are people that have different views on the end time, and mine has changed over time because I wondered, okay, if I'm trying to build all these businesses and I die, why am I even building them in the first place if everything is going to be burned up? And that was kind of what my eschatology was at the same time, because as you're thinking about, as I think through like what I do for a living, I try to filter it through a biblical perspective. Am I doing things that God wants me to do? And I read this book called The Household and the War of the Cosmos. And it was very, very interesting that there were a lot of people that, and you think about, they build for things that are for 200, 300 years down the road. And you think about all the churches that were built in Europe that are still standing, and they were built in the 13, 14, 1500s, and they took 300, 400 years to build. And so what's interesting is what fueled that. And as I read them, it was their eschatology, that they were like, okay, we know our lifespan's only going to be at the time 40 or 50 years. So what are we building for? And I went down a rabbit hole, and I go, oh, okay. So, I need to think about, like, even at my house, if I'm going to keep my house, in the family, then I have to think about really where do I put the hedges that they're going to be here for, if they're going to be 100 years. Like it would let me think through things in a different perspective of, okay, what does this look like 100 years from now? How do I do that? And so in business, we're taught, hey, build a business that you can sell one day at a 4 multiple. And I don't think about building businesses that way. I think about building businesses now where I can help educate my kids. They can opt in anytime, and we can teach them about accounting. We can teach them about marketing. We can teach them like what we would send them out to college to do. They can learn that right here in this little ecosystem very easily and very economically. And they can learn how to do that, and give them choices to opt in at any time, or hey, there's an idea out there that you want to take advantage of, or a business that you want to create. Well, how do we become an incubator for that so we can help them do that? And so that's kind of, that, and that's relatively in the last 3 or 4 years that's kind of been codified after, kind of reading things and going through things. So my businesses, I'm building them not to sell them. I'm building them so my family, or I can have people that that I employ opt in, and think about it differently from that normal employee-employer type of relationship.
Okay, so you mentioned that your eschatology has changed over time, and you said post-millennialist is where you're at now. Not assuming that my audience knows anything about that. What do you mean? Can you unpack? So first is, please just give a quick, we don't need a whole study, but a quick, what do you mean? What's post-millennialist for somebody who's asking that? And then,
okay, well,
and then how did that shift? When you're shifting in your eschatology, how did that change your perspective on all this?
So I was reading the book of Revelation, and just super confusing book the first times you read it. So I read a lot of different perspectives on it. And one of the perspectives I read one time was a book called When the Man Comes Around. And basically what the eschatology, post-millennial in a very nutshell, is that everything in Revelation that is talked about in Revelation has already happened. And it happened in 70 AD when Rome sacked Jerusalem, and all the descriptors that John talked about in Revelation happened then. And I've read about it. I've read about that eschatology for a long time, but just never believed it because it just didn't make any sense to me. And when I read When the Man Comes Around, there was a lot of stuff that the author pulled out that I just couldn't go. It just started making sense. And it was just a new way for me to filter it. And the premillennialist or amillennialist, the difference is some people think that a lot of the stuff in Revelation is actually coming, or that's in the future. So post-millennial is, we're in the post-millennial time of Christ, which it's very different because we have this dichotomy of, we think that in the Bible it says the devil goes around and he owns this world. Well, post-millennial is, no, Jesus runs the world and the devil's handcuffed. And yes, things look bad, but if you look over time since the year, and if you look in the last 100 years, you don't think that Christ has had that much of the church hasn't had that much effect. But what you need to do is just zoom out 2,000 years, and how much ground have we gained in 2,000 years? And it's been a lot. So that's it. I don't want to get more wonky than that, but you feel free to look.
But the main thing is, the book of Revelation it's not a future, it's already been fulfilled since AD 70.
Yeah, basically 95% of it was done in the AD 70. So
all right, so thank you for that. And then so how or why did that shift how you look at you mentioned things like looking at building things for centuries, not just for your own lifetime. Is that what that shifted your thought to, like, I'm just building for myself, or this consume? Because most of us in this society have this consumer, like, disposable microwave culture. So this is a very different perspective. And so flesh that out for me.
Well, okay. So, and in that part of Revelation, and in the way that the descriptors is like, when I thought, my thought process was, when I die, I go to heaven. Well, where does heaven reside? Well, heaven actually, when Jesus comes back again, and I said, like, that last 5%, we'll rule on earth as and we'll have bodies like Christ, and it'll be this earth. It'll be that Phoenix that you live in, and this Memphis. It'll be changed. It'll be it'll be and so that's the dead will rise again, and they will walk the earth, and we will have heaven on earth. And so that just blew my mind. I was like, okay, that's a different perspective. If I believe that, then I have to think not just about me and my estate and giving it to, making sure my kids are taken care of, but what about their kids, and what about living and having a faith that that transcends generations, because we don't know when that's going to happen. So that's what changed the perspective. I
Okay.
think I was living in a like, oh, okay, I'll make sure I have plenty of life insurance, and the wife is taken care of,
Right.
and if I die, and then I just but so that's what kind of changed the perspective.
Got it. So I want to make sure I understand. So uh in this eschatology, even if you were to die today, uh the dead will rise, and so
Yeah,
you will be like the stuff you're building in the old eschatology. You die, and doesn't none of this matters. But when
right.
you think about this post millennius view, even if you were to die today, you're still
Yeah,
going to rise again here, and so the stuff you're building matters, even for you, not just for the next generation, but even for you personally. Is that right?
right. Yeah.
Okay.
and,
Okay. Well,
and
yeah, that would definitely make a difference for sure.
right. And again, it's one of those things where it's more, again, we do talk about, like, I just said earlier, like, hey, I got to think about where these hedges are in 200, 300 years, or
Right.
where.
Right.
And it offers you the ability to think through other problems differently, and not
Hmm.
just in the time frame of 5 years, 10 years. You just zoom out a little bit.
Hmm.
And so I think it offers that perspective.
Hmm.
um, and I like the idea of playing the infinite game. If we're going to live forever, right? and
Hmm.
and and if I'm right on the eschatology again, and I could be, I'm very malleable on these ideas. That
Hmm.
I'm not malleable on the ideas of Christ came and he came and he died. He after 3 days he rose, and he was
Hmm.
on earth for 40 days. But on the eschatology, if I can be convinced, I can be convinced. And so this has been the most convincing argument for me so far. So now, how do I think through my problems in
Hmm.
that perspective? So that's
Right.
what drives that.
Yeah. And I love this. And this is one thing I love about doing this podcast. You know, if there is a format, it's basically let's just see what happens.
Yeah, see what
And
happens.
I just trust the process. And I love how I love different perspectives. I love like different anything that can challenge your current paradigm. Because one question that drives me is if everything you knew to be true, you found out wasn't, would you even want to know? And I think most people don't. They would say, oh no, I will leave my head in the sand and just carry on with this ignorant bliss. But I'm somebody as and that's what part of that awakened life branding for me is like I want to be fully awake and aware, so I'm always looking for challenges to everything I believe to be true.
Hmm.
I'm open, and I hear you saying that too, but I'm open to that being challenged.
Yeah.
I'm open to my perspective being shifted. I'm open to my paradigm changing. So this is actually, and this I can't believe this is happening because I consider myself an old Christian. Like I know a lot of stuff. Like I'm pretty familiar with a lot of stuff. But this is a view that I haven't really heard articulated before. So it's really cool to hear. Um, all this to say, let me get to a point here, which is I mentioned at the beginning, you come across as this guy that has things together. And so, I was just talking to my mastermind group today, and we were talking about how your results are, your habits and your routines create your results, but it's actually your thinking, your perspective, your paradigm, your thinking, your thoughts that actually create your results. So you're a guy who's getting results that I admire. I would like to have more of. I have a perspective. I'm very much this microwave consumer. Like it's you use it once and it's gone. Like fill up the landfill. Um, I need more of your I need more of your, I need to balance that out.
Well, I mean,
So this is
our
good for
trash
me.
are full too. So yeah. So again, I can't tell you that I'm, it's one of those things where you have these philosophies and you try to live close to it.
Sure.
But and I think it's a compliment to say, hey, you seem like a guy that has it all together. I will tell you that that is more exactly up here than sometimes in reality, because we have problems. We have problems with our kids. We have, you know, in between you and I, we share some details, but I think that having it all together is completely up here. It's like, first of all, are you connected to Christ, and are you going to Him for in prayer time, but also perspective all the time, and as much as possible, have perspective, because things go up and down in business. I will say that there are peaks and valleys in business, but the one thing that you can just always, the one thing that helps me is I'm playing an infinite game, uh, always, and in between I'm playing real games that have ends, and there's wins and losses, and there's trophies, and sometimes there's really high highs and there's low lows, but at the end of the day, my whole thing is like, how do I just stay in the game for as long as possible? And at my trajectory, I always want it doing this, but the way that it looks like is this right here.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
and so my perspective is been really by other men, by other people that I've listened to them over time. A lot of, like you said earlier, I'm seeking out people that will disrupt my thinking, because I don't mind the disruption. Because if I'm thinking wrong for a long period of time, that's exponential bad. But if I can be offered a different perspective that challenges something, and then I can double back, and now I can make a shift here. That only helps me. What I find, again, this is why I like talking to teenagers, is because they're very malleable. They're willing to listen to different perspectives. Within our group, we've opted in, hey, challenge me. But most of the world is not like that. Most of the world just wants to stay and do their own thing. And you know it when you see it. You know when there are people that want to be challenged, and there when people that know, I want to stay rowing in the same direction no matter what happens. And you gotta leave them alone, because they have to be disrupted themselves.
Right.
So
I call that being coachable. If somebody's not coachable, it doesn't matter, right? But
right.
The degree to which you are coachable, the degree to which you're willing to be challenged, there's power in that. And anyways, so I want to wrap up this. I do want to get back to like your influence in teens, because that's another area I struggle. Like I tend to work really well with adults, but I've tried with, and I have teens, and so I'm like, I often say, we've been doing this marriage work for like 15 years now, and people would say, ask about kids, and I'd say, you know what, we're not in this to be parent coaches. We're marriage coaches only. We don't have a clue on the parenting side. It's evolved over time because our kids are older now, but that's sort of been my thing. Like I have this this challenge with teens. So I want to hear that, but I want to wrap up the previous topic with just this idea that if you want, so I like your results. I would like to model and emulate what you've created in your life and your businesses, right? You have some stability. You have this, like you said, it's a perspective. It's up and down thing, but the perspective, you sort of have this sense of like, where things are going. And when you like someone's results, if you want to model after them, find out how they think, find out what their paradigm is. And then, the question I often ask in a coaching session is, what would anyone need to think to get those results? What would you need to think to get those results? Or what would anyone need to think? And so if we can like glean from, okay, so here's how Michael Stansberry thinks, and that might help us get those results just by changing our thought. We might not even like do all the same, rituals as you, but if we can start thinking like you, we can probably model those results.
All right. So how do I think? Like that's the, what do I, um, I will tell you that the process of like the daily habit of thinking through my day very early in the morning, after I've done some sort of devotional and getting on the calendar and looking through that. And then the thing that I've been trying to be intentional about is I think about the other people that I'm associated with, first in my family. Okay, my wife gets everything that she wants, and I mean that in this way because I know she's not like gonna ever ask or do anything because I know her, that's out of bounds. She,
Mhm.
what do you want? What do you need? I can take care of it. We got
Right.
to go do passports on Friday. All right, I got it. I'll make schedule for it. So I have, one of the things I think about is how do I help her in every way that I can. You need me pick up
Mhm.
Lily at 4 o'clock. I can move stuff around. I can figure out how to do it. If
Yeah.
there's an immovable object, I'll say, hey, this is tough here. We got we got a 20-year-old who can do it. Anyway, there. So I think about that. I try to stay
Mhm.
okay. Keep the most important thing the most important. And if you say in your this tough part, like there are people, and I was this way for a while early on. Yeah, my family's most important. I want to spend more time with them. Yet I'm working 80 hours a week, so
Mm,
that wasn't correct. And
right.
so again, um, make sure your actions are lining up with what you say. Again, one of the
Mhm.
things that I heard yesterday, which is good, and everybody's heard some sort of iteration of this, is watch what they do, not what they say. So
Mm, mhm.
what I'm very I think through what do I do? How do I operate? How do I operate
Mhm.
as a married man if my wife's most important? How do I make sure that I'm taking care of her and not having any kind of inclination where she thinks that there's a problem there's I think through every relationship that I have outside of that, how do I honor her with that? And with your kids is we have teenagers, and we have my 20-year-old son who works with me, and it's been great. But at times when he was 17, 16, it was as having teenagers, there's peaks and valleys. And but making sure that um, you're thinking through how do I encourage them and help them. So for all the kids, how can I be there for them? And then I think through the people that I work with, and I have great people that I work with. How can I encourage them? How can I help them? Because at the end of the day, this is the tough part. Is like for a big part of my business, it's like, all right, how do I do this? How do I do this? And when you realize when you run a business with people, you leverage people by not leveraging them, by not treating them as as um, as employees, but as human beings, the image bearers of Christ. Okay, what does that really mean? Well, how do you help them, encourage them to do the best that they can? So that's how
Mhm.
I think through that. I think it's really simplified a lot of the stuff. And even in my business, I use virtual assistants that live in Colombia, and we have a great relationship with them. It's more than just an employee. It's like how do we how do we look out after them?
Mhm.
And that trickles down. My people that work for me, they have they are bought into that type of appreciation for the human effort and everything that we do. And so that's what I try to
Mhm.
that's how I try to think through my day. You're dealing with people all day. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to love on people.
Mhm.
So do that. So does that make
Mm,
sense?
okay. Yep. So that gives us a little insight into how you think. If there was more time, I would want to really dive into like you've got this business level of business success. That's a good one, and I know that my audience would love to hear that. But just to make it so, because we don't have time to dive into that, maybe on maybe another podcast episode, but uh, my idea is like, what would be your number one book recommendation for a business owner or entrepreneur? Like, is there a number one book that you would say, hey, this is what I modeled for business success?
I have three tied for the number one spot.
All right, let's do it. Let's hear it.
All right. So one is Chris Voss's book, which is Never Split the Difference. It's a great book on negotiation. Probably one of the best books on negotiation. Number two is How to Win Friends and Influence People. But
Hmm.
the Road Less Stupid is a great book.
The
It's a book.
Road Less Stupid. I've never heard of
The,
that before.
the Road Less Stupid. So it's
Oh, okay.
for if you're a business owner, it asks, you know how you just said earlier, hey, I want to be disrupted a little bit. That's a disruptive book because
Okay.
it's going to ask you questions about your business that you don't want. You don't want people to ask. And
Okay. I
and then
like
it
it.
causes you to stop and you go, okay, I've asked these questions, go think about it. And so what the hard part is that people don't do because we run 90 to nothing is we don't go think. We don't sit there with a piece of paper and think about those questions, those hard
Hmm.
questions. And that is that book. And then How to Win Friends and Influence People. And
Hmm.
that would be my top three on, my number ones.
Good. All right, cool. All right, so before we wrap up our time here, I do, from the very beginning, top of the show, I've been wanting to ask you your secrets for making it work with teens and younger, the next generation. As I mentioned, I've been challenged with that. Like, I have somebody that I recommend who does what I do. It's a coach, a kind of a performance coach, but for kids. And I have my kids go to her because I tried it and I couldn't figure it out. But I'd love to have your tips on like what comes to mind. I know one of the things that you have already like alluded to in your story is just spending time. But what are the things that maybe aren't so obvious? Like what because I know, knowing you, I know that you love hanging out with kids. You must have a knack for it because they must love hanging out with you too, right? So what's the secret to that?
Well, the truth is, like we made the decision to kind of when we made the decision, we have kids. This is a tough part for people to handle. Like your season of life, like me and my wife secretly, we do look forward to not having kids in the house. We do.
Sure.
We got 10 years so, but this is the
Your
reality.
secret's safe here.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody.
So if you're watching, guys, we still love you, but we're still counting down the days. But we made the decision that we're having kids and we want to be the house where they hang out at. So we
Right.
created the house that they hang out at. We have a nice pool house and with a pool, and on the weekends the kids are there. So guess what? We got a deep freezer and stock full of food. And if the kids
Food.
that's it. And you just create that environment where it's safe for them to come, and kids love coming over to our house, and teenagers do, and that's what we want. And so that being that, and then hanging out with them and just asking questions. Kids, you mentioned this earlier. They're sometimes at home, they're just not, their parents are not engaged like they are, and quite frankly, I know what that's like. We've gone in and out of like, hey, we're really in tune, and then maybe there's something off here. So please, you've done a great job elevating me a little bit, which is fun. But the truth is that I've experienced everything that everybody that's listening to this experience with their kids, distance, hardship, all that stuff. But again, it comes down to decision making. Make the decision that, hey, if you want the house, if you want to know where your kids are, if your kids are at your house and it's a safe place and they're having fun there and there's food and there's a reason for them to be there, then that's great. And then you can have that opportunity to speak into their lives when they want to, because like it's like they'll ask the question and they'll be if you're warm to them and you're interested in them. And again, it goes back to the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you're asking about them, somebody did that to me when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and that was another adult couple did that to me. And over time, if you build that trust, they'll open up to you, and you can find out how you can help them. So that's it. Keep it simple, but you're right. Have lots of food.
Yeah, that's a good clue right there. Yeah. So I mean, but at the bottom line is just goes back to that, being intentional. One thing that Awaken Life Academy talks about is having a legacy vision, not just a vision for your life, but a legacy vision. And I think this conversation models that concept better than anything I could put into a lesson or anything. So I love that. And having that legacy vision as you're yeah, as you call it, the infinite, you said
Infinite game.
infinite game.
Infinite.
Yeah. But having that as your paradigm, the basis, and then building from there, it seems like some business success comes out of that, some, family marriage success comes out of that, some influence success, and, being a part of your church and your community and your kids' community is good. So yeah, those are the questions that came to my mind that I was curious about. But is there anything else that you wanted to, burn great ideas, any tips, tricks, anything that comes up?
No, I mean, I would just, I would just say that, if you're committed to, when you're committed to your family, and you really think through that and think through how best to honor those commitments, all these things will come into place. And it really begins with how do you think through things. But because sometimes we're just thinking, how do I make ends meet? But sometimes you got to get past when you talk about this, the human needs, is to sit there and think really through that and give yourself permission to think through that. When you're young and you're early married and you're dirt poor, or you're poor, maybe you got to maybe live with your in-laws for a little bit, which we did. It's it's and that those are times in your life when you're not willing to listen to other people. You're just trying to figure it out on your own. If you're that person, think through that. The being humble enough to go, man, I don't know everything. Those are the people that eventually end up winning in life, is the people that ask those questions and can be is okay with the disruption, is okay with the suffering through the fact that they've been doing the same thing for 3 years and it hasn't worked. But the best part is when that it hasn't worked, you can shift, and it's not going to be the end of the world. There's pain and everything, so just embrace the suck of it. So I guess that's it. That's what I got.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, the humility that you alluded to there, like that comes across, like you several points in our conversation today. Like, I'm like, obviously a very humble heart. I'm sitting here saying like, you're like very impressive to me. And you're like, well, I'm not that cool. Yeah. So,
Right.
I mean, it comes out and it's genuine. And is that something you would say, like, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, is that the message? Is there anything else besides that?
Yeah, it is completely and utterly drop the pride. Listen to go find mentors, and again, read. I didn't start reading good books. I was that typical, you got a degree at college, and I mean, I got all the education I need, now let's go crush life. It was until my mid 30s that I started to really go, oh, is this really how life is supposed to be? And was humble enough to I got a coach, and it took me a year and a half to take his advice on some business things.
Wow.
But that he said, here's what to do. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And I didn't for 19 months, 18 months. And then when I did do it, I had lots of fruit right away. I was like, oh, okay. All right. So listen to good, seek out people that are doing things that you want your life to kind of look like, and listen to them, and then take action. That would be my message to my earlier self. And here's the cool part. I got a 20-year-old son, and we talked about legacy and things like that. He doesn't know this. He's going to crush life by 50x because he's willing to listen. He's willing to, not because we're teaching him anything, but he's willing to listen. I've got him. I've got other men in his life that are talking to him about things that he can learn from me. But sometimes when you hear it from dad, it's different.
Right.
But you hear it from somebody else that you think is cooler, it's a lot different.
Yeah.
So, but he's gonna do really well because of other men in his life, and he's coachable, like you said earlier.
Yeah. So good. Okay, cool. So, well, Michael, I really appreciate you taking your time once again. to be on the podcast. I think there were so many nuggets here. And just want to thank you and appreciate your time. Several takeaways: be coachable, be humble, have a legacy vision mindset, and play an infinite game. And read books. That's one thing, every time I talk to you, I hear about several books. This being no exception. Every conversation I've had with you, there's like always a great book. So that's something I definitely believe in too. Just like my education after college has been way more valuable just by having an Audible subscription, right? Yeah. So lots of good stuff. So anyways, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you being here. Talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for listening to the Awakened Life podcast. I've been your host, Scott Landis. Hey, are you feeling overwhelmed and stressed out? It could be that you're out of balance or have a misalignment of your time and priorities. This month at Awakened Life Academy, we're featuring the Total Freedom Life Wheel exercise designed to help you uncover what might be off balance in your work, life, and other priorities. And then it helps you realign your priorities to your purpose. Check out the full training video and free download at wheel.awakenlife.com. That's wheel.awakenedlife.com for free access. Don't put this personal growth opportunity off. Go get it now and start to experience the freedom that balance can bring to your life. Go to wheel.awakenlife.com.